We are live.
Well, hello and welcome to our ISE Fireside webinar. We're thrilled to be with all of you today. We are very grateful to have Apporto as our sponsor today. So thank you very much for underwriting our program. And our topic of discussion is cloud desktops in the browser, a shortcut to zero trust. And I promise you it's going to be a wonderful discussion. Before we jump into our introductions of our panelists and learn a little bit more about our sponsor, I want to go over a few quick housekeeping things with you. Viewers who watch our webinar today will be eligible to receive 1 CPE credit, and you'll be able to give us that information by entering your CPE credit in the survey at the conclusion of our program today. Make sure you do not exit early, and otherwise you will not be able to tell us that you need that CPE credit, and we will send you the email tomorrow morning so that you can make that deposit into your accounts. Additionally, we will have a Q&A session. So as you're thinking about a question today, we encourage you to enter that right in the Q&A chat window, and we will answer those questions. So let me sort of take you through our agenda today. We're going to hear from our panelists and learn a little bit about them. We're going to hear from our sponsor as well and learn more about what Apporto does. We'll jump into our panel discussions, and we've got some hot topics to cover. And then, of course, we'll cover our Q&A session and sign off at 2:45, giving you all a few minutes to before your 3 o'clock meeting. So let's go ahead and get started with our introductions. Thrilled to have Frank Ilo with us today. Frank, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what's going on?
Sure. Hi. Well, thank you for having me, Marcy. I'm Frank Aiello. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for Maximus. I just passed my 3-year mark at Maximus, having a really good time, and it's been certainly a challenging time, like everyone, getting through COVID the past 2 years. But we are a government contractor working in the health and human services space, so this has been a big challenge and a big topic for us in zero trust, and also how we enabled our workforce over the past 2 years to operate in telework.
Perfect. Well, thanks, Frank. It's always good to have you with us, and we always appreciate your insights. David Nolan, great to have you here with us. We've been trying to book you for so many different events, and your schedule's been slammed. So I'm so happy your calendar worked for us today, and I guess you're in the office.
Yeah, so
in the office with Mr. T in the background.
yeah, we're so David Nolan, Vice President of Information Security at Aaron's. So we've got responsibility for everything from privacy and risk side of the house all the way to the traditional kind of security operations and various stacks. So always love these conversations, be able to network with peers and stuff. But similar to Frank, it's been a fun few years here, especially in our kind of retail segment where the business has drastically changed, both on the formal business side, but also kind of the way we work. So it's been real fun and a real challenge, and glad to be a part of it.
Well, thanks for being here. And Anthony, glad to have you with us, and we're really grateful for Apporto's support today. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and introduce your company?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me here. I'm the CEO, founder of Apporto. Apporto is a relatively young company. We've been around now for about 5 years. We're based in Palo Alto, in the heart of Silicon Valley. I should say we used to be based there, since right now nobody goes to the office, or very few people go to the office, quite candidly. What we're focused on is that one of the biggest problems that I think we've heard that David and Frank mentioned is that when people started working remotely, this expanded the security perimeter of all organizations very significantly. Whereas in the past, what you had to worry about mostly is the network and of your corporation. Now you have to worry about the security of the endpoint, maybe even the physical security of the endpoint. You have to worry about the VPN. So what we've come up with is a solution that enables employees to be productive remotely while enabling IT admins to reduce the security perimeter, so they don't have to worry about the endpoint, they don't have to worry about the VPN, And through this presentation, we're going to talk how we achieve that.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Well, let's go ahead and jump into our discussions. I know we've got a lot to talk about today. So our first topic is really, I would coin the status report. So let's just level set where we're at right now. And I think we all concur by the way we are. Remote working is here to stay. We're going to be either hybrid, sometimes in person, sometimes we're working remotely when it's just a little bit more convenient. But we're going to have those options. That is the workforce of the future. And I would say even Gartner's agreeing with that prediction, where they projected by the end of 2021 that 51% of the knowledge workers will be working remotely worldwide, which includes that hybrid worker and office worker as well. So what we're really seeing is really the fine tuning of how businesses and security teams are going to need to support and work both sides of the environment, but on a permanent basis, because a lot of the things that we put into play were somewhat of a triage and have worked out well, and some of it has needing repair as we go down the line. But really, the extension of our security footprint really makes sense. With the extension, I should say, of our security footprint, it's really about zero trust and how that can really work for different organizations out there. I'm really personally excited about this area because I really think it identifies a lot. It solves a lot of the problems that we have come to find when we're setting up these remote workforces, and also getting our technology in play with zero trust has its challenges, but it also has its real benefits overall. So let me go ahead and jump to Frank. What percentage of your workforce is now working remotely? Are they fully working remotely or hybrid or a combination thereof? And is there some concerns overall around working remotely or when having virtual workers? I mean, you're in the healthcare industry, so you have a lot of information.
Yeah, I think the latest count we have that I heard at work is we're still at about 70% remote. There is some hybrid, and we do have some that are working remote and they're doing like A shift, B shift. The largest number of employees we have with an organization are contact center employees. So we have tens of thousands of call center representatives, and most of our programs that were built were meant to have people in the office. The security was built around not only the perimeter, but having people physically located in the office. So in 2020, this was a major shift for us. There were even programs where right up until the last minute swore we were not leaving the office to move. So it was a pretty big change for us from that perspective. So now we're looking at we're really gauging our customers' risk tolerance. Some of them are looking at this as an opportunity to reduce overall project costs by eliminating real estate from the program, and they've become more comfortable with the virtual call centers. In other cases, we're probably looking at eventually coming back into the office. From a security standpoint, I mean, of course, we were very concerned. As you mentioned, we are in the healthcare space. We do have access to and we manage a pretty sizable volume of sensitive data. And so, from the perspective of the telework, I think one of the main concerns is looking at the insider threat risk. And we have people that are handling that data. So we're continuing to look at how do we allow them access while still ensuring that it doesn't leave our network, ensuring that we are able to detect if any data does leave the network. So it's been a pretty big paradigm shift for us over the past 2 years and looking at, our business model, which again was built around in part having physical security of all those workers and having them work from a single physical location.
So David, on your end, what's your workforce looking like working remotely, and are you embracing any of these zero trust initiatives along the way?
Yeah, so we're one of those embracing the remote work thing that Frank mentioned. So we've seen it as an opportunity. Being a retailer, it was a challenge for sure, right? So day one, how do you take a physical brick and mortar store and make it virtual? But a lot of creative people, a lot of innovation there, and we were able to do it last year. To your question of like how many, so a lot of our stores have returned to in person. A lot of our customers still like that type of interaction, but Similar to Frank, most of our call centers are now 100% virtual. Our corporate headquarters are optional, but most people are choosing to mainly work from home. It's been a good thing, I think, for us in the industry. Opened up the hiring pool a lot further, but it has created a lot of things where we got to look at concepts differently, look at our traditional security controls and architectures differently. And I think zero trust is one of those that of course today happens a lot. I think we were joking with earlier, it looks different for every company, so it's not one of those things I think you can just buy it out of the box. And Frank and my company would look probably a little bit differently, right? But I think really trying to look at how people connect to the network from home versus in the office, really it should be treated just the same, right? Versus the whole the castle is safe and the remote office in this case isn't. So I'd say we're really looking at embracing those on both the identity side and some of the other technologies, both in the cloud, but also for more traditional approaches like data center software and things like that.
Perfect. Well, Anthony, you have a real interesting perspective as well. So you work with many different clients out there, and would love to hear what you're seeing from your clients' perspective as it relates to working remotely, and maybe love to hear what you see also, what their top concern is overall. Is it ransomware or something else out there?
Sure.
This whole work structure has invited a lot of new threats to us overall. I'd love your perspective.
So what our customers, and we have 180 customers, and what they've told us is that during the pandemic, they just put together whatever they could put together to enable their remote workers, right? It was, using duct tape, using whatever it takes to get everybody to do remote work. But now that, we're a little bit beyond that sense of urgency, everybody's thinking, and particularly in light of, all the ransomware events that we're seeing out there, everybody's looking at how do I move beyond this emergency setup that we put together almost overnight to something that is more long-term, and that will enable us to support those remote workers for the longer term. And typically, when most people look at the areas that are at most risk, it's the end user, it's the VPN. In fact, not only the VPN is a risk area because of the end users, phishing and whatnot. Many devices, many VPN devices, many VPN vendors, I counted 7 of them in the last 2 years who have announced VPN vulnerabilities in their technology. So clearly VPN is a very, an area of exploit by outside bad actors, but also the end user device. If you have remote workers who are using, let's say, VPN to log in, now you have a device that is on your network, and who knows what the end user is doing with that device? Who knows what they're installing, what phishing schemes that they are, subjected to. So this whole concept of having endpoints, having VPN, the bottom line is that it expands the security perimeter very significantly. IT now has to worry about a security perimeter that's 3, 4, 5 times larger than what they used to, and something needs to be done about that. And this is really what our value proposition is about, because we deliver the virtual desktop in the browser. It removes the concern about the endpoint, what's happening with the endpoint, because the end user connects over HTTPS and not over VPN. It removes the VPN security. And we have multiple layers of technology like desktop variants and least privilege that enable you to even reduce your security perimeter further.
Well, with the remote course that we're talking about here, the hybrid, and shifting gears a little bit, there's a lot of challenges with that on-prem VDI and the traditional DOS that's out there just in general overall. And there's a lot of latency I mean, the internet connections, at the end of the day, before I got on our Zoom or I had signed on, it like kicked me off because the internet was suddenly unstable and then it corrected itself, you know? So you're dealing with home networks or internet connections versus, you know, your corporate ones. So the reliability of them is a little bit challenging. And of course, you've got the endpoint security concerns with bringing your own devices into the mix and being outside of the traditional network. So VDI, as it was intended, you know, doesn't necessarily work in the modern hybrid type of world, and it caused a lot of vulnerabilities out there. And when you have like situations like the Colonial Pipeline that demonstrated how a VPN vulnerability was completely exploited on top of the, you know, the latency that you might get, but Gartner, again, 40 to 50% of the cybersecurity attacks are using now VPNs as their entry point into the organization, as compared to before. So these traditional security solutions, as we're seeing, have sort of served us well, but with the new environment, it's not necessarily where we have to go, and we're going to have to think about some different things. So, David, I'm going to kind of jump back to you here. Are you using a VDI or a desktop as a service in your organization, like in your call centers, for example? And what have they solved for you, or have you thought of something else to, you know, have your virtualized call centers working remotely?
Yeah, I think VDI and kind of all the technologies in that space are really great for kind of flexibility, especially when you've got a very focused use case yet, right? So, Marcy, you mentioned one of the types of examples that are popular, but you know, if we had a connection for you know, very limited use to, you know, one system or conceptually just needed to do email, those are great solutions for that. So. We've definitely kind of opened our eyes over the last few years to using more of those technologies. I think historically, with being a retailer that sometimes is in areas with really horrendous internet connectivity in some of our stores, you know, looking back 5-6 years, some of these technologies were tough, but we've experienced a lot of them have come a really long way in the last few years. So even for a lot of those cases, these VDI type technologies really are practical these days for someone that's got a footprint like we do. So yeah, we've definitely adopted them kind of across the board for various use cases.
So Frank, on your end, you know, are you using a VPN type of solution for your organization, or has that been sort of giving you a little bit of heartburn at night, thinking about some of the vulnerabilities that might be coming down the pipe, or literally through the pipe, I should say? And, you know, are you starting to rethink it?
We are. I mean, we are using VPN today. It's still legacy that's been around for a while, but there is a big shift to virtual desktop, especially we are using a desktop as a service. It was integral to our transition to telework back in the good old days of February 2020, before all this stuff happened. We were, or was it 2019? It was going far back now. You know, we were just at the early stages of starting to migrate our data centers into the cloud, which we just fully completed a few weeks ago. And one part of that was to get rid of VDI. So we brought on a virtual desktop service, started migrating the 2,000 users that were on virtual desktop into that environment. And then, you know, when COVID hit and we had to start migrating, you know, thousands and thousands of users off, that started to become our strategy. And we grew from, I think in about 7 weeks, we grew from about 2,000 users up to well over 25,000 users. I think we peaked at somewhere around 35 to 40,000 users. And then we tapered down as we had some additional work come on. So ideally, we're starting to shift more to that off of VDI or off of the VPN and onto virtual desktop. Ideally, I would like to eventually see VPN just being used by IT staff when they need direct access to the office. Otherwise, I think we're finding fewer use cases now where it needs to be brought on board, especially as we move more to the cloud. A lot of even our own laptop users are finding less of a reason to log on to VPN now. They can just get access to everything they need through our cloud resources.
I mean, you're right. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to skin this cat overall. And Anthony, I'm going to have you take us through the bigger picture, because the coolest thing about when we get to work with solution providers like yourself is you have such a holistic 30,000 feet look at across all of your clients. And certainly we're diving in here. So I always find it to be really awesome to have our sponsor give a perspective of what they're seeing and from a trend perspective. So what are you seeing across the board in deploying a cloud-based desktop as a service type of solution? And maybe you have a lot of, you said you had 180 clients, so some of the best practices to ensure an efficient deployment.
Right. So I think one of the biggest challenges we faced in the early days is end users acceptance. Actually, I shouldn't say acceptance. I should say end users' reluctance to jump onto what they perceive to be laggy VDI. I think anybody who's used VDI 5-6 years ago would tell you that their experience was laggy, that they would move the mouse and then they would see the cursor move, half a second later. And the reality is that the technology obviously is a problem. If you have a data center, say in Northern Virginia, and you have one of your employees who are based, in California, let's say, even at the speed of light, which is the speed at which the packets travel on a network, you still need 100 milliseconds for the packets that correspond to this event to travel to the data center and back. So you're fighting the speed of light. The solution we came up with is that when a user logs in, we detect where they are logging in from, and we connect them to the data center that's closest to their location. So if they're logging in from California, they are automatically connected to a data center in California. And not only this enables us to deliver a much better user experience, which is very important, it enables us to deliver a virtual desktop where you can have even video conferencing running as well as the video conferencing that you're looking at right now. Because, in the traditional VDI, where you have all these packets that are traveling around the country before they hit the Zoom server, you're going to have a very poor video conference experience. With our environment, because, for instance, here in Palo Alto, when I connect to my virtual desktop, it's only traveling 20 milliseconds to the data center, and then it goes to the Zoom data center, which is only another 20 milliseconds. So using this geo-optimization technology, using advanced compression and decompression technology, our users are amazed when we send them on a video conference inside the virtual desktop, and it looks no different than the video conference that they would be using on their native computer. So one of the biggest challenges is the perception by people who've used VDI in the past or desktop as a service in the past, and who are like, this is going to be slow, this is going to be laggy, this is going to impact my performance.
Excellent. So let's shift gears a little bit to what you were saying and really expand upon what you've been saying, Anthony, around a modern cloud desktop. Because that's really what we're talking about here, is a modern cloud type of desktop overall. And what we're saying is users really should not be forced to tell the difference between a native application and a virtual desktop application. They just want it to work and click on it and be seamless, do their work, kind of just like how we're on Zoom right now. We just want to be able to make it all work and have it happen and just be seamless overall. And so I really think a zero trust type of architecture provides that kind of simplicity and the granularity, certainly around the privileged access side. But the security perimeter has been reduced by placing now a barrier between the browser and the user's desktop. So this kind of gives us as security professionals a little bit of a sigh of relief. I don't know if it's always I don't think we ever rest, and I don't think we're always satisfied, because we all know security is a journey. But the VPN access can really kind of be taken out of the equation, and the latency doesn't become an issue, and we're also allowed to have a lot of more alignment with all of our regulatory requirements like HIPAA and everything like that. So I think it just gives us a lot of enhanced flexibility, what you're kind of talking about and what you're seeing with your customers overall. So, David, I'm going to go back to you, because one of the things that I've always admired about Aaron's is that you guys create a lot of your own applications internally at your organization. I know you have a lot of developers because you have it's your own shop, right? It's your own business processes, and you have a unique business model. And I don't think off the shelf things might be workable for you guys. So what kind of demanding applications can a modern cloud type of desktop support, especially when you have a good chunk of your workforce now working remotely? Does it help, you think, to have that solution in the browser versus sort of elsewhere out there? Is it just cleaner for you guys?
Yeah, for sure. I think definitely having kind of that browser-based approach, I think is a lot of advantage, especially if you've got staff that wants to travel for 2 weeks to another country, but they still want to do work, which is becoming more of a thing with the work from home type approach. So these solutions are great for that. I think there's quite a few use cases that this works really well in, and like I said, that we've been really looking at and adopting, especially if you get all those random exceptions that we as security professionals always hate. VDI is a great option to just create them a small sandbox with very limited access, something you can control, bring up and down, especially with those zero trust principles in front of it. So I think it shows promise and is exciting. I think the one use case we're always going to struggle with is what Frank mentioned, and what we see too. You mentioned all the building and stuff we do. We're constantly trying to figure out how we can keep the user experience the same for our technical teams, and get their work done as effectively as possible, as securely as possible, but with using a lot of more modern approaches to this. So that's one we've always fought, and there's still a few challenges out there with some of the providers that provide these solutions, a lot of the more traditional ones, where the geolocation is an issue, to Anthony's point. And if you got to bounce from Atlanta to a data center on another coast and back again, users are definitely going to notice that, and depending on their job, it may not be sustainable. So to kind of wrap up, though, I see a lot of promise in it, and it's something that definitely as part of Zero Trust, I think is worth looking at for those that are going down that journey.
And Frank, on your end, in your organization, how are you looking at endpoints being protected? Are you doing so in a modern kind of cloud desktop as a service type of solution, or are you able to deliver zero trust yet? I know you talking about it, want to go there, but where are you guys sort of at in that journey?
We're still in the early stages. As I mentioned, we just did a major data center migration as we look to, we just entered fiscal year 23 now, or I'm sorry, 22, and we are starting to look at, SASE and network of the future, and how we're going to re-architect our network. And so part of what we're doing is we have these major initiatives underway is trying to build zero trust into them. So rather than trying to make it its own separate initiative, we're trying to make those advances. And so I think, again, sort of COVID sort of pushed us along with desktop as a service. It's now become just part of the way we operate, and as we look to different use cases for it, and I was looking at some of the examples that are around, like, hey, well, how does it perform for us? I mean, it's actually performed quite well. We have call center employees who are using it for just email, accessing custom developed apps, but also for voice over IP. But then we do have that other extreme use case where we have our developers that are doing a lot of development work on it, and we even have some coming in from overseas. So while we're still early in, I mean, it's desktop as a service is certainly an integral part of it. And then we're looking, as we take some other transformational initiatives with the technology over the next few years, and ensuring that we're integrating zero trust into those concepts as well.
And Anthony, overall on the operational needs and the business goals, tell us how you think these two organizations might be able to achieve a virtual type of desktop, and having that flexibility overall. sort of some food for thought for us to kind of walk away with.
Yeah, I think quite candidly, what Frank mentioned really hit, hit resonance with me. I read this quote recently, and it goes like this: when you take the toothpaste out of the tube, it's very hard to put it back, right? And I think Frank, and I guess a lot of customers are doing, things now that they probably may not have done without, without the pandemic. But to some extent, it may very well be a good thing. And the thing, to keep in mind about zero trust is that first, the definition is, all encompassing. And before we started this call, David, Frank, and I were talking about how everybody has their own definition of what zero trust is. And every vendor, to be candid, has their own definition of what zero trust is. But everybody has to figure out what it means to them. And if you were starting a brand new company and you started the company to implement zero trust, it would be relatively simple, but most everybody has a huge legacy of systems. And to retrofit all of those existing systems to comply with the tenets of zero trust, this is where the challenge lies. In fact, even companies like Google is recognized obviously as an IT leader, as a very agile company. It took Google 6 years to move from their traditional environment to a zero trust environment. So it's a long journey. There are many moving parts. There is a lot of legacy. And I think some of the initiatives that Frank and David talked about go a long way towards that direction. And obviously, again, our perspective is that one of the key tenets of zero trust is reducing the security perimeter. Reducing the security perimeter where it really matters. And where it really matters is that 70% of the ransomware, 70% of the problems we're seeing with security occur with the end user. So to the extent that you can reduce the security perimeter there, it's a huge win from a zero trust perspective.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Overall on that perspective, Frank or David, do you have anything to add to that? Awkward pause.
Yeah, I don't want to interrupt. Yeah, I agree with everything Anthony said. Like, you got to figure out what it means to you from a zero trust journey perspective. I heard one of our peers say something really good a few weeks ago about it. Like, you don't have to have a perfect architecture within the first year or so. Baby steps can be progress to eliminate that surface that Anthony's talking about. Like, doing something is better than doing nothing. So if that starts with getting everybody in the habit of using multi-factor across the environment, and you're not used to that today, that's a good step, right? If it means moving the traditional perimeter-based trust controls where you had an internet control versus an internet control to match the internet control, that's progress. And at the end of the day, you're marching towards that architectural concept, and that can be success. It doesn't have to be this giant project that has hundreds of people on it to get you where maybe one very specific reference architecture has you. So progress over perfection is with anything, I guess.
Security is a journey, at the end of the day. So, and we've always prided ourselves on that, and it's never ending, but it's always being perfected. Frank, would you kind of concur with that before we jump into our questions?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think one of the alluding to Anthony's comment as well. I mean, when we had that pre-discussion, one of the things it said was there's no product. As much as some of the vendors want you to believe that there is a single product for the solution. So that's why, again, we've taken that approach of as we're building, transformational changes within our technology, building those that zero trust architecture into those changes and making it. I think David said it very well. I mean, we're just looking at making progress. We're not looking to make perfection. There's no one solution you're going to implement to solve the problem.
Anthony, before I jump into the question, do you want to kind of put the final word in before we jump over to our question?
Yeah, and I think to add to what David and Frank said is that zero trust will not be a destination, because as we are making progress towards zero trust, the bad actors are making progress with their technology. And what that means is by the time we get to, the end, let's say we get to whatever zero trust is, and, we haven't agreed on what it is, but let's say we get to, by that time, they will have access to even better technology, for password spraying, for ransomware, or for whatever technology that they use. So there'll be, a zero trust version 2, or, whatever the case may be. So I think to David's point, every step you take in that direction, you're better off. To Frank's point, looking at what it means to you and implementing some of those, is very, very good. And, you're much better off than not doing anything, obviously.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for sharing your insights. We've got a question here from Wade Bassett. I think it's a really good one. Our continued challenge with VDI technology is that we need to use it for the developer efforts, and many of them want to bring their own tools that are either from the Linux and Mac platforms built in the VDI modeling. And do you have any challenges supporting these developer toolkits requirements as they want to bring them? That's a great question. It was sort of a little bit where I touched on with David, because he has such a lot of development going on in his environment. So Anthony, do you want to kind of take a stab at that first?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And, since we are in next generation, virtual desktop, cloud desktop, we wanted to make sure that we could support just about any device. And when we look at the stats, about 7% of our users use Chromebooks. A couple percentage use iPads, 15% use Macs, and the rest use Windows. And since we take care of this translation layer that we call hyperstreaming from Windows to HTML, all the end user has to have is a browser that supports HTML, and they're good to go. For that matter, we also support, for those people who need it, Mac virtual desktops. We support Linux virtual desktop. So if you have an engineering department that needs to write software for Windows, for Macs, for Linux, we can deliver virtual desktops on any platform that will run a Windows, a Mac, or a Linux operating system.
David or Frank, do you want to add to that question?
I mean, we have several hundred developers within our shop as well, and with Mac hasn't come up really as a developer platform, but recently Linux has, and we are working with our virtual desktop team to build Linux desktops that'll be locked down. But we do give our developers more flexibility. I mean, we realize they have to install tools that are a little bit outside of what we would, most end users normally support. So we give them a little bit more flexibility with some administrative rights to be able to manage some of the tools on their own desktops. But today we do have a call. Most of them are working on Windows, but within our virtual desktop environment, they can work in Linux. And I think that's the benefit to Linux as well. We don't have to have, with the desktop as a service, we don't have to have multiple devices now. They do all have either BYOD, or they do have a Windows desktop that they use for their day-to-day office tasks, but we can create that sandbox environment where they can do their development work off within our virtual desktop environment.
Yeah, are you seeing that trend as well? Oh, go ahead, David. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think we kind of have the flip now in a digital transformed world. We've got a lot of like Android and iPhone type apps, so that's one thing. But most of that stuff can be virtualized pretty easily. We are a big Windows shop, so that I think that makes things easier for us. A lot of our development is happening on the Windows side. I think the only thing I'll add here is moving forward. What we've found really success in looking back, and for companies that are moving forward, is when you're moving to these technologies that at least will perceptually change the way that developers and technical teams do work, partner with them to understand how they do their work and meet in the middle. Because I've seen so many companies where they'll try to say, well, tough luck. That's not how you have to get work done in the future, and it can be really a lot of friction and destructive to the business. So I think even if you're in Linux or Mac or whatever platform you're in, really trying to understand the developers and meeting them where they get work done can go a lot better for security adoption and tool adoption.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. Great conversation today. I know I learned some things overall in different perspectives. One of my favorite new topics in cybersecurity around zero trust. We have love your feedback from our audience today. It does help us plan our future programs. So in the chat window, we have a SurveyMonkey link. So we'd love getting your feedback. If you are in need of CPE credits, please make sure you let us know your CPE number so that we can email you tomorrow morning your letter of participation so that you can upload those credits into your account. We've got some great events coming up. So we're certainly in Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and please check out the ten-inc.com/schedule. Also, our ISE Award nominations are open. We're bringing back the ISE Awards in 2022. You guys have some great projects and everything going on out there. And it's time we celebrate all the hard work and leadership that we have seen during the pandemic. So to get some more information on that, please visit our website at ten-inc.com. And it's a little bit of a long URL, but we have a slider on our homepage that will take you right there to that page. And again, we want to showcase and honor the great work that you're doing. I want to say thank you again to Porto for being our sponsor today. We really appreciate our partnership with you. I know this is the first time we've worked together, and it's been a really fun process learning more about your company and all the great things that you're doing out there. Also, I want to say thank you to Frank and David, and certainly to Anthony for providing their insights today for an interesting conversation. And thank you all for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next time. Have a wonderful afternoon and stay healthy and safe. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.